Hello, and welcome to the Global Logistics Conference at FreightWaves. My name is Steve Ferreira, and I'm CEO of Ocean Audit, a global ocean freight and freight audit consultancy in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm so pleased today to host the Global Maritime Conference and one of my special guests today, Sanne Manders. Sanne is the COO of Flexport. Sanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Steve.
That's so terrific. And we're going to talk today on how we overhaul global shipping. And Sonny, I gotta tell you, I am living with, and I know you are too, but I'm living with what I call and what I've called container geddon these past 7 or 8 months. And I've gotten a little grayer for it, Sonny, and I'd like to reflect with you on how the heck did we get here?
Yeah, and I'm sitting through a lot of QBRs with clients these days, and this is the first question that everyone is asking, and they're also asking, where are we right now? And to start off with that one, I think we're in peak chaos right now. My prediction is that it's going to get a little bit better. But how did we get here? Well, we got here. It started exactly a year ago. It started with announcements around COVID, and people started panicking. Offices got closed. Blank sailings were announced because out of 100 economists, 100 predicted doom and gloom and global trade to come to a standstill. And that didn't happen. It happened for 6 to 8 weeks. And then we all of a sudden got a rush into PPE and global trade started accelerating. And then we figured out that we were not going to spend our money out of the home anymore on restaurants and holidays. So we're going to spend it in our home and in our gardens. All of a sudden we started buying bird feeders and, and gym equipment. And this has led to, an unprecedented surge, right? It's a real tsunami of freight, 25% year on year growth. And it's had led basically to anywhere you can pinpoint, a place in the supply chain. It has led to chaos, whether it's on, availability of equipment in terms of containers, chassis, enough space on vessels, containers falling off vessels, drivers being available, warehouses being available to offload containers. Wherever you pinpoint something in the supply chain, there is an issue at this moment in time. I think we're at the peak of it right now. Customers are tired. They're
They are
exhausted.
they are tired, and not only are they tired, our whole market is, going through a metamorphosis with Chinese New Year upon us, and through the sessions that we've talked about, and when we have Chinese New Year, and then we have obviously the situation on contracting and rates coming up for 2021. And I know you and I have talked about the whole issue of performance-based contracts and how we kind of look at the future. Why do you think the market might be ready for some fundamental changes in how we contract freight? Let's address that question.
Yeah, and it starts with my previous statements. Is like importers and exporters are exhausted, right? We did, they're exhausted because the prices are high and the reliability is low, right? Port to port reliability has dropped to something like 45% in the fourth quarter of 2020. Well, if you're going to door with all the equipment issues that we have, congestion in the ports, etc., multiply that and you're getting to a number that is really close to zero. And if you're paying top dollar plus you have no reliability, that's your primary concern. So why is the industry ready? Well, we did a webinar the other day and we polled around 1,000 participants, and 78% said that their top concern was reliability. So that's why I think that performance-based contracts, or as the industry calls them, enforceable contracts, are something that actually is going to be part of the bid season and the negotiations. I think it's important to say, like, industry calls it enforceable. I like to call it performance-based, just like you, because what it should do is it aligns different parties in the chain. Because if we're talking about the value drivers of our customer, if we can align those with the value drivers of the carrier, then you're talking about end-to-end performance. And we think that's, this is the moment to have those conversations.
And you raise a really interesting point, and I think when you look at the thousand participants, I mean, I'm sure you had customers in many different segments, in the 200 container range, in the 2,000 and 20,000 and maybe 200,000. So I think that when you look at those different niches, right, I'm sure Flexport's approaching the discussions of performance-based contracts, very geometrically, but at the same time very laser focused. How do you think some of those performance-based discussions might play out in terms of what the customer might be looking for, and how do you change the dial a little bit, Sanne, in terms of establishing that performance-based contract with the customer? Who would arbitrate it, and do we even need that?
Yep, yep, yeah. No, and that's a very common question. Do you need an arbitrator? I don't think so. Between companies, you can have performance-based contracts. You can build in, KPIs in bilateral contracts and live according to those. If you ask me, what the future should look like is that every QBR, every quarterly business results, we are actually talking about our performance-based contract, and we're going to see how we can improve that performance on those KPIs. But it comes with some requirements, right? Currently, a lot of the MQCs are negotiated by total demand for the year divided by 52. That's not going to fly in a performance-based world, especially when you have a lot of fluctuation, which is kind of normal in most supply chains because there's seasonality. There's not a single shipper I know that has MQC divided by 52 every week. So there is quite a bit necessary in terms of planning, but also in defining what are the bandwidth and really ironing out the T's and C's. I think what is super important here is that we have to combine this with technology, because you can do this all on handshakes, but if you don't have the technology and the visibility and the ways to measure and hold us accountable against that performance, then it's going to be, it's going to be a dog and pony show that's not going to deliver any value. It's then an intent instead of something that you can realize. So technology, visibility is extremely important to get this realized.
I think you're spot on, and I want to touch on that in a little bit as when we get a little further into our conversation. But going back to the enforceable contracts, when you look at the Flexport market out there, or the beneficial cargo owners that are out there and are part of your group of 1,000 that are looking for this reliability. When you look at enforceable contracts, I'm sorry, let's use a more common positive spin on it, performance-based contracts. In your opinion, who might need more convincing? Is there one segment, for example, retail or chemical or consumer goods? What's the segment that you think is really ready to jump on this? Or is there even one that is applicable and it's more a common issue of just kind of rolling out and getting the performance-based contracts, abridged so that both parties have a quid pro quo and there's a satisfactory transaction?
Yeah, and I think this is an excellent question. And there are some segments of the market, typically in the air freight market, that are already working like this, right? The automotive is all working on just in time, right? It's kind of a performance-based contract because they translate that to their supply chain partners. When you're looking at the ocean market, since that's the topic of our conversation, it is a pretty a conservative market. And there are a lot of, let's say, this is how it's always been done type of discussions. What you also see, it's a large cost item. And those large cost items typically go under the supervision of the finance function, the CFO. And CFOs typically think cost first, revenue second for some reason. There will be immediately, as soon as the world is normalizing a little bit, there will be a lot of pressure again on the cost side rather than the reliability side. And when I'm now in QBRs with my customers, and the ones that are doing really well have built in a lot more flexibility, right? They have built in options through premium services, but they typically also build in a little bit more flexibility into the inventory, right? Because if you don't have inventory, you can't sell. And so they have built more flexibility, and that is typically costly. Flexibility is costly. Premium contracts are more costly. Inventory is costly, but it allows them now to sell. So it is really about a discussion that needs to be at a higher level of the company as the never out of stock type of discussion. And I think that discussion became crystal clear this year. So I do see this is the moment to introduce them, but we should also anticipate that it's not moving that fast. It's not that 2021 will be all performance-based contracts. There will be a sliver of the market.
Oh, listen, no question. But one thing I love what you said, and I was looking at one BCO reporting their results. I saw the CEO of this particular company reporting results, and she made a point to talk about how shipping added so much more cost to the bottom line. They were still profitable, but one of the reasons why they were is that they did real well in forecasting and inventory. So really interesting, Sanne, that it echoes precisely the call outs that you just made in terms of who can benefit the most. And I think it will be those players that are able to hone in on the forecasting the most accurately, and also the ones that are the most sophisticated around the inventory management, which brings me right into the aspect of, so you get into these great, exciting performance-based contracts, and now how do you look at how do you move beyond a handshake, right, and get into the enforceable and use the platformization and the technology to enforce them? And I would really like you to address that with our audience.
Yeah, and it starts very much upstream, right? It starts with order management, because that's where you want to have the visibility starting. Order management leads to vendor management, right? Are we delivering on our cargo ready date? Right? Then it starts, the global shipping chain, right? Do I actually have a full visibility on my inventory, all the associated delays? Do I have an ability to reroute? Containers are containers, but it's cargo in transit, right? There's SKUs in those containers, and it's inventory in transit. Do I have an ability to reroute and to manipulate that? And then, of course, as soon as it hits the shore, do I have the visibility up to the warehouse and in the end to the final consumer? Demand planning tools, if you even go further upstream than purchase order management. So it's all about digitization of your information and getting a full end-to-end view on your inventory position. Inventory doesn't start in the warehouse. Inventory starts on the production floor of the factory.
And I think that you just really hit on something that is the royal flush, right? Or as I say, when you have a good stock, it's the diamond hands. I think that when you start looking at, having great order management and all the other, intricate patterns that you just described, right? Order management, the inventory, the forecasting, the demand planning. I know that Flexport has recently introduced some order management systems that have gotten really rave reviews and some good reviews from the marketplace. And so I think that that's probably something that you took away from your interviews with your clients, and you'll roll that out. So I did want to ask you, now that we understand where you stand on performance-based contracting, and I think you really helped us look at how we overhaul global shipping with regards to these issues. I wanted to roll into a question on there's so many fitting parts that fit here, and I want to just make sure I fit this in. The FMC's recently looked at free time, detention, demurrage, and certainly free time. I have to ask the question, it's a big issue in 2021. How do you see free time and detention fitting in as it relates to go forward with contracting?
Yeah, and first of all, it's a big issue because containers are not returning to the ports, right? And as a result, we have 500,000 containers short in Asia. And why are they not returning to the port? Warehouses are not able to receive cargo. They have a lot of COVID cases, etc. So yeah, you see a lot of detention and demurrage costs for clients. And I think detention and demurrage is it's part of performance-based contracts, right? And you need to talk about the tools you have to avoid those, right? And in the case of detention, there are great tools, right? Transloading is one of them. We see it that for our premium services, for instance, I think the majority of it is transloaded, and that's not necessary in that case for the detention of the container, but it's just to speed up the service. But you can do the same for avoiding detention. It's the same with demurrage, right? It doesn't have to stay in the port. You can also bring it to a different yard to avoid the demurrage charges. So there are a lot of tools, and you should bring those into your contract negotiation. With part of it you can actually back to back discuss with the carrier, right? Carriers are open to this, having different terms and conditions. Part of it is that where you forwarder can actually use these tools like transloading, pre-pools, etc., to make sure that you avoid those costs.
Well, certainly as a world-class forwarder, you give your clients a lot of different options, and I think that's one of the reasons why experts like myself always recommend that BCOs look at NVO forwarding as a strong option, strategic option, especially in 2021. So you've really given our audience a great overview and consultative approach on where we go from here. And Sanne, I really want to thank you for the time today. You've been watching my special guest, Sanne Manders, Chief Operating Officer of Flexport, and myself, Steve Ferreira, talk about how we overhaul the global shipping market. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great conference.